Hello, welcome again to Great State. And once again, I have a very special guest. I think she's on this side of me. Erin
I
is
am.
back. And today, what we want to talk about is teletherapy for kids. And this is directed at you, the parent. All right. So, Erin, thank you so much for meeting with me again to kind of do part two of our previous talk where we talked about the pros and cons of teletherapy and just working with kids in teletherapy. It is something that a lot of us are doing now. And, there's a lot of therapists out there that had a lot of questions. So we got to answer a lot of them, which is great. But I know there's a lot of parents who have tons of questions about teletherapy, what to expect when working with somebody, and you are working with tons of kids online right now, more than I am. So I thought it'd be great to bring you back to talk about that and answer some specific questions.
Yeah. Well, again, it's great to be here. I'm excited to share my experience and hopefully it's helpful.
Awesome. So the first thing I would love to touch on is teletherapy versus in person. I've talked to some parents who are very concerned that just being online and doing that teletherapy experience is not going to have the same results, isn't going to be as good, that their kids aren't going to be able to do it. What are your thoughts on that?
I understand the concern. I think we would all prefer to be in person. And that's how I was trained to do therapy in person. We didn't talk about doing teletherapy in this way. However, having done it now for oh goodness, I don't even want to count how many months, but for several months. Now I am aware that it is actually possible. And not only is it possible, but you can still make progress. You can still see forward movement. And the kids and families that I've worked with have reported they see change. They've seen positive things come from it. So even though, yes, to affirm that it's not the same, but it is still good and it is still doing therapy and there is still a lot to be gained from it, especially during such a difficult time as right now when we're recording this video and we're forced to do it because of COVID-19.
Yeah.
So it definitely, that should not be a barrier.
Yeah, and there are a lot of pros and cons to teletherapy. I actually did a video on this previously, and I'll link the card above here somewhere for anybody who wants to check out that video as well. And it goes over a lot of concerns about teletherapy that are going to be applicable, whether you're a kid, an adult, a couple looking into it. But there's been a lot of research done on teletherapy even prior to COVID-19 and the things that have forced us to go online. And for most things that you want to work with people with, that teletherapy is going to be as good as in-person therapy. You're going to still get results. You're still making that connection with people, and you're able to do most of the things that we would do in the room from the comfort of your home. So
it's very true.
Yeah. So that's something I wouldn't be as concerned about. For me, actually, I think this holds true whether you're talking about kids or you're talking about adults, the biggest thing and one of the biggest indicators of whether or not you will have success is not whether you're in person or online. It's that fit with the therapist.
Yeah. Right? I would still agree. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I think especially with kids, I think adults can sometimes, kind of muster their way through things, and they're like, I'm going to do this. But even then, I would recommend if you're not feeling it with your therapist, you don't feel like it's a good fit, get a new therapist, right? Find somebody that you're able to talk to and connect with. And the same goes for kids. I think as the parent, you need to like the therapist and get along, but even more so, right? Your kid's got to be comfortable with that person. Otherwise, they're just not going to get any of the work done that you're looking to get done in the room.
Absolutely. I mean, you should definitely be asking questions, and not only to your kid, not maybe about what the therapy session is about, but, how did you like it? How did that person make you feel? What did you like? What did you not like? But ask the therapist. It's really important to ask the therapist about what is their vision for teletherapy with your child or teen, and what is, what are their engagement strategies? What are things they like to do? And teach the therapist about your kid too. So the therapist knows, oh, these are some of the main interests. And of course, the therapist will get to know your kid one-on-one as they're moving along. But there are things that you might think of that your child might not think of because they're kids and they're very focused on what's present in the moment. And often a child answer is, I don't know, or I'm not sure. And so it's very helpful to have the parent feedback and support.
Absolutely. You
Yeah.
know, and I think one of the other things that is what you brought up that was really important is about asking questions, especially in the
Mhm.
beginning when you're, trying to pick a therapist for your child.
Yeah.
Ask that therapist questions like, are you comfortable with working online? How long have you been doing it? Like, what kind of things are you do you do with the kids? And they should be able to tell you, a lot about how they do their practice, the things that they work on, and how they work with kids online, because it is a bit different.
Yeah.
A lot of the things like play therapy and art therapy, right? I mean, in offices I've worked in, we've got full on like bucket loads of art supplies and toys and coloring things
Yeah.
and games. And, I've worked in offices where I had a pool table in the office and a foosball table, which was fantastic with working with kids,
Amazing. Hmm.
right? So much fun. But, now that is so much harder. So I guess, are you able to do play therapy and art therapy online with kids? And like, how do you personally approach that?
Absolutely. Again, like you said, it is a little bit different. I don't have my bucket of games that I can just pull out and be like, okay, we're stuck on something. Let's play Feelings Uno.
Mhm.
However, I think, and as we spoke about in the last video we did together, there are a lot of online apps that can be some of those play therapy games. The whiteboard through Zoom or Microsoft Teams or whatever platform you're using. A lot of the video platforms have the whiteboard for drawing, coloring.
Yep.
I have discovered several websites, which Jesse, I will ask you to put below so people can see them, with free printable worksheets or worksheets that you can share. So I love sharing my screen. And the kids think it's cool too, because they're like, oh, great. It just seems kind of fun, something that they do. And of course, they've been in school all day. Some of my kids that I work with know Zoom better than I do. And they're like, you can do this. And I'm like, oh, great. I'm going to use that in the future.
Yeah.
But there are a lot of worksheets and resources that are different games. They're interactive. There was one I found where I could share it, but the client could click and color on it too. It was pretty cool.
Awesome. Yeah. So, right. I think a lot of therapists are utilizing technology to present, activities and things like that,
Yeah.
or have gotten very creative in different ways of doing that. And it may require the parent as well to get a couple extra supplies. I think most people who have kids certainly
Yes.
do have a stockpile of some art supplies at home, right? Crayons, paint, whatever. And, maybe the therapist might ask you in advance, like, hey, next week we're going to do some of this. Can you make sure there's, coloring stuff or just sheets of paper and crayons if that therapist isn't utilizing any of these like online things. So it might
Right.
require like a little bit of work on the parent side to kind of prep, but I think most of it is pretty easy and also probably doesn't require any special shopping trips.
Right. I mean, like, I'm a fan of using Play-Doh or what's that? The like sand. What is
Oh
it
yeah,
called?
yeah.
You know what I mean? It's like, yeah, anyways, it's play therapy sand is what I call it. But I mean, I could have some and the child could have some and we could take turns. Like, let's make a figure out of our Play-Doh, or let's talk about the senses that we have and using the sand. And those are things I would do in person anyways, but we can make it work
Absolutely.
over video chat.
Nice. So I think another important thing, right, is setting your kid up for success, right? And this is the same whether you're going in person or you're in teletherapy, but certainly teletherapy, especially depending on the age of the kid, right? I work with some teenagers that are, effectively just young adults, right? 16, 17 years old. They know more about computers than their parents do. They know more about what's going on than I do sometimes on some of this online stuff. But right, so they're pretty independent functioning, right? But then when I'm working with kids that are, like 7, 8, or even younger sometimes, right? Parents are going to have to really set their kids up for success. And I think part of that is like, how do they sell the therapeutic experience to their child?
Yeah. I mean, I think, therapy, especially if a kid has never done therapy before, it can sound a little intimidating at times. But I think talking to your kid about their concerns or their thoughts in advance and making sure if that's something you think would be beneficial and helpful, being honest about that and talking about maybe either your own experience with therapy or knowing somebody else who's done it, to put a positive light on how it can be really helpful.
Mhm.
I think too, I had a client whose parent wanted me to do like a 15-minute video consult. So instead of that, like many therapists will offer a free 15-minute consult to see if it's a good fit, right? Because as we said earlier, having the fit between therapist and client is really important.
Mhm.
And this parent asked me if I would meet with their teen for the 15-minute consult over Zoom. And I said, absolutely, because that was a setup for success so that their young teenager could kind of vet me out a little bit too.
Mhm.
And they could have that discussion offline of, do you think this is someone that you could spend time talking to and seeing yourself feeling comfortable with them?
Absolutely.
I think most therapists are going to be open to doing that. And I was happy to use the consult to do that. And
Mhm.
a few days later, the parent wrote me back and said, yeah, we're on board. Thank you so much. That was very helpful.
Awesome. Yeah. So right. So
Yeah.
don't be afraid to ask a therapist, hey, can we use that like consultation to meet my child so they can get to know you and see
Yeah.
if they like you or they want to work with you too. Right. Absolutely. I think that's a wonderful idea. Also, right, in selling it, right? If there's a difference between saying like you've got to talk to this person, even though and just like the body language and the tone that you do it versus like, hey, it's a really cool person I want you to talk to, and
Yeah.
it's going to be a lot of fun, and just like really like being excited about it, right? And you're like, how you sell it to your child is going to set the frame for how they're
Right.
going to look at it.
Right. And yeah, being realistic about there will be times when it's fun, of course, and there will be times when it's hard, but that's why we're there.
Yeah.
We're there to work on those things and move our, feel better. Really, we all want to feel better. And that's why, for me, parents and kids come to see me because they want to feel better or have better self-esteem or there's something they're working on. So yeah, it might be hard in the middle, but at the end, it's going to be much better than it was when you started. And I think, often when I work with parents and families and we talk about giving their child choices,
Mhm.
I think doing that 15-minute consult with your child, even though maybe you as the parent has set the standard that you will be going to therapy because I think this needs to be worked on,
Mhm.
and you will get a choice in who we meet with,
Yeah.
So that kind of gives them that feeling of, okay, even if I don't want to do it, no matter how you spin it, mom, dad, grandma, grandpa, whoever it is,
Yeah.
I don't want to do it. At least they have some choice in the matter if
Mhm.
that's possible. And I
Yeah.
think it's more possible now with video chat than it was with in person because I never offered a 15-minute in-person consult.
No. Yeah. Usually it's been like on the phone, right? Something talk on
Yeah,
the phone and then they come. Then next time you see them, it's an appointment in the office.
exactly. So the
Mhm.
first time I saw the kid was the first time they came in. And so I feel like this is an opportunity and something that once we go back to in person, I might continue to offer.
Absolutely. Awesome. Another one that comes up too is how present do the parents need to be, right? I know there's a lot of parents out there who suddenly find themselves being like an assistant teacher's aide, setting up Zooms, classrooms, and all the being highly engaged
I
in their
know.
kids, schooling online. So, how important is it for the parent to be like present and available and engage in some of the like logistics behind doing online therapy?
Yeah. As always, I always ask the parent to be on the call for the very first like initial intake assessment. So I
Mhm.
like, that is a non-negotiable for me if a kid is 15 or younger. Maybe
Yeah.
if they're older than that, I might be okay with doing two separate conversations.
Mhm.
For really young kids, I always ask for the parent to be, available in the household, have their phone on them. I mean, there's confidentiality, and I want their child to feel like it's their space, which
Mhm.
can be tricky in a home, of course.
Yeah, and we'll talk about privacy in a second, but yeah.
Definitely. But I also, need access to the parent in case
Mhm.
something happens. Or I have one kid who, when he is frustrated with what we're doing in therapy, will turn the computer off and log out. And I have to text his mom and be like, he did it again. And she'll come in and she'll set it back up again and we'll get right to it. But it's really helpful that she has her phone on and accessible and she's
Yeah.
checking it.
Yeah, I think certainly you don't want to like set your young child up with the therapist and then go grocery shopping, right?
Right. No.
It's not a babysitter, right?
Right. No, I am not a babysitter. I'm not a babysitter when we're in person. In person, I expect parents to be in the waiting room or in the parking lot in their car. And so the same thing with teletherapy. If you don't have to be in the room or sitting outside the door or putting things on hold. I understand maybe you have other kids in the house or maybe you're still doing work. Maybe you're making dinner. Go about your day. You're at home. But just be aware your kid is in therapy. And if the therapist needs to contact you, make sure you're in good communication and you have a set way to do that.
Absolutely.
Older kids, teens who are able to be at home by themselves, I usually just ask, like, go about your day as you would, but make sure that you know when your kid's appointment is and have your phone ready and available in case something were to happen.
Absolutely. Yeah. Older kids who are more independent, I certainly, I tend to treat them more like just young adults, right? They're able to, some of them have jobs and cars and all sorts of responsibilities. And at that point, right, they certainly are managing a lot of the stuff themselves in a way, right? They kind of remember when, some of them, they know when their appointments are and they log on and, I'm less concerned about being able to get a hold of their parent unless something comes up that's really necessary to get the parent involved with.
Right. And of course, it's case by case too. Some cases, some reasons that we're in therapy have a lot to do with the family. And so, of course, regardless of age, we would want a parent or an adult of some sort at home and available. Absolutely. So again, to go back to the ask questions and have open conversations with your child or teen's therapist, it's really important to know what would be the best situation.
Absolutely. Privacy, right? Very important in therapy. And I'll say it's also important for your child's therapy. I don't care what age they are, right? There's going to be some times when they're talking to the therapist one-on-one and it's important to give your child privacy in therapy, right? So ideally, right, they have a room that they can go to and they can shut the door and talk to the therapist and do the work that they're doing. I would say the only time I'd be okay with that not happening is if the kid really wants their parent in the room for some reason, or or if we're doing obviously a joint session, then everybody's in the room.
Right. We've planned family therapy or something, but I have advised parents, and honestly, most of the time I don't need to even mention this because the families I've been working with have been really great about it. However, I do practice in New York City, and as the rumors are true, space is tough to come by. So
that's her entire apartment right there. Her kitchen, the bathrooms through that curtain behind you. And that's it. That's her whole place.
It's not, while that might not be true for me, it is definitely true for many people.
Yeah.
So privacy can be a huge issue. So having a conversation with your kid beforehand about where do you feel the most comfortable doing therapy could be one thing. Bedrooms are certainly great places if your child has their own bedroom. If your child shares a room, having that conversation with the sibling about this is the time for that kid to be in there.
Yeah. I've actually had, I've been doing family sessions where then I talk to the kid by themselves and everybody's in the living room. And I've actually had the kid basically kick the parents out to the parents' bedroom.
Yeah.
So the parents are like, all right, we're going to go hang out in our bedroom for a while.
I've done that too.
Being able to give them that space and and that's private, keeping siblings out of the room if possible.
Right.
So they're just not disturbed or distracted. Because nothing's worse than when you're on a roll and then something comes in to distract people and it just goes off the rails.
Yeah. And I think the flexibility to know that may or may not happen and it's okay, but we want to make sure it doesn't happen all the time and
Yeah.
decrease the possibility of it.
Unless you
There
have a
are
puppy, in
creative
which case the puppy is allowed to interrupt at any point in time.
Oh, I'm always available for pets to interrupt.
Yeah, pets interrupting is my favorite.
Totally fine.
Yeah.
But there are some really great creative ways to give that privacy,
Hmm.
confidentiality. I mean, especially if you live in an apartment where maybe walls are thin, you
Hmm.
can give your child some headphones,
Oh yeah.
set up a like white noise or a sound machine, or just make sure that there's music playing out loud in the background so
Hmm.
that other people in the house, have that covering up. I had a kid go for a walk.
Yeah.
They had their video on their phone and they were like, I'm just going to go outside for a walk. I had a kid go to their parents' car and just sat in the car while we
I've
did session
I've seen many adults and many kids sitting in their driveway in a car because
in a
that's the only
car.
place
Right.
yeah, right. They're like, it's the only place I have privacy right now. Nobody else in the house, and they sit in the car for a little while. And that's worked out great. So yeah, so
Right.
there's a lot of ways to be able to give people space, to give people privacy. So,
Absolutely.
mhm.
Yep. And you can get creative. And again, like therapists at this point, we've done a lot of different things. So if you're having a hard time coming up with a solution, let's problem solve it and bring
Yeah.
it up in therapy. And your therapist might know something that or have experienced something that you didn't think of before.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah, I guess the only thing I would never recommend is while in the act of driving, I've had people try to do therapy like while they're driving and like have their phone mounted and things like that, or like in a coffee shop or something, like in a public space. I avoid
Yeah.
that, please. But otherwise, yeah, there's a lot of creative solutions.
Right.
Um,
Like going for a walk, you can pick a path that not a lot of people walk on,
yeah.
or a little corner in a park, or you're really just having a quick walk by. So people aren't standing around listening to your conversation.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And then speaking of troubleshooting, right?
Yeah.
I encourage parents to be familiar with the technology that they're using, right? So if I'm like, hey, we're going to use Zoom, try to do a dry run beforehand, right?
Yeah.
With a friend logging onto Zoom, or just be aware of the technology that you're using. Make sure the sound works, make sure your camera
Right.
works. Whatever you're using, right? Try to get familiar with it in advance because therapy sessions are an hour, right? I say that in quotes because right
Yeah.
they're always
45
like,
minutes to
a,
an
a
hour.
therapy hour is like, somewhere between 45 and 55 minutes
Yeah.
or so. And we don't want to spend like the first 10 minutes of that, like, I can't hear you. What writing notes to each other. And yeah.
Yeah. I mean, as best as we can,
Mhm.
it happens. But if you
Oh yeah.
troubleshoot beforehand, then it is less likely to happen. I also have realized that most of my kids are much better at the technology than their parents are.
Oh yeah.
And as I am. So, yeah, I mean, even just asking your kid, like, hey, the therapist wants to meet on Zoom. Do you know how to work Zoom? Let's show me how you do it.
Mhm.
Have your kids show you. So they're like, okay, great, I got this.
Yeah. I think most kids now are like professional IT troubleshooters with the amount that they have to be online now. So
Yeah. And also, ask your kid what they feel most comfortable on. I meet most of mine through Zoom, but I did have one ask to meet through Skype, and I have another one who asked to meet through FaceTime.
mhm.
So I really just have a conversation about privacy, and that if they meet on other platforms, that there's no privacy setups. Like with Zoom, you have a password or a private meeting. And so
Mhm.
there's those HIPAA compliant privacy things set up that with other platforms there's not.
Yeah.
However, that doesn't mean it can't be done.
Mhm.
So again, ask the therapist and
Yep.
ask your child what works the best.
Yeah, and currently, due to the COVID-19 pandemic, the Health and Human Services has actually waived a lot of the HIPAA requirements for
Yeah.
teletherapy platforms. So that's why you'll see a lot of therapists utilizing platforms that they might not use previously, because
Right.
we're doing so much more teletherapy now, and not every platform is as user friendly. Some of them I've used at this point probably like 6 different platforms to connect with people
Same.
and trying things out. So I've got my own preferences, as I'm sure Erin has her preferences. And
Yeah.
sometimes it changes based on what client I'm talking to and what works for them too. So,
Exactly.
awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think the biggest thing is, ask questions, right? Don't be afraid to ask
Yes.
questions of your therapist. They by this point in time, I would say most therapists who are practicing have done a lot of teletherapy and certainly can answer a lot of questions.
Yeah.
Just if you have any questions about how it's going to work, what to expect, if there's anything we haven't covered here, right? Ask your therapist. They're likely going to have an answer for you or be able to find one for you pretty easily.
Exactly.
So I think that about does it right now. Erin, do you have anything else you want to add or say before we wrap this up?
Just that, therapy can be intimidating, I think, especially to young people who haven't ever done it before. And so, as a parent or caregiver role, just, making sure you're connecting with your child and your therapist about some of those concerns and having open and transparent conversations. And that actually sets a really good precedent for the rest of the therapy, because being transparent is really important. If we don't know what's going on, we can't help fix it or make progress.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Erin, for being here again. I really appreciate you taking the time to talk about this with me. And I'm going to try to figure out some excuse to have you back again. Maybe we can
I'm sure we'll come up with
next
one.
time.
Can we talk about The Bachelorette?
That'll be our side channel.
We can talk about how we would conduct therapy if we were the therapists on ABC.
I like this plan. ABC, if you're listening, we're available.
We are.
All right. Well, that being said, thank you so much for tuning in. If you like the content that's being created, please like and subscribe. It helps me out a ton and lets me know that you like what I'm doing here. And welcome to the Great State community.